It goes without saying, movement analysis is one of the hardest skills for instructors to develop. But what if we had a tool or a framework to help lay the foundation for where to start? Well, Evan Vomacka joins us in this Tech Talk to share a tool that he developed for just that. His movement analysis worksheet provides a filter to look at skiers through to begin to build your observations. He not only shows us how to use this worksheet, but how it can work on any skill level by walking us through observations of 3 different skiers, ranging all the way from a beginner all the way up through a national team member. I've been super excited to help Evan share this tool ever since he casually dropped it in a group text months ago. So please enjoy this episode of Okemo Tech Talks, brought to you by the Okemo Ski Ride School.
This was the original sheet right here. Starting with turn shape, going down to turn size, just really basic things we can look for. Ski relationship. Are they wedge, parallel, diverging? The edge relationship. Are they on those opposing edges? More corresponding but not equal? And, are these things happening consistently, inconsistently? And where are you seeing it in the turn? Same thing with spray. And then, is it more of a carved turn, skidded turn, and kind of where? And this is the realm we're going to play in tonight. There is a whole section on more of the body performances. We're not going to have enough time to cover it all. We're going to keep it as quick as we can to that 1 hour segment. So with that, we are going to jump over to our very first sheet. And we're going to start slow. We're going to start with just picking out the turn shape that they're making. So ignore all the other wonderful things that we see from the skier. Focus in just on the turn shape, turn size. One of the things I like to figure out, or I like to look at to figure out the turn shape, is where I see the most movement happening in the turn. Is it relatively smooth, consistent movement throughout? Is it more movement at the top and then they kind of hold on to the turn? Or they kind of come in slow and then all the movement happens at the bottom? Or do they have that little guy traverse, quick turn, traverse? Cool. And I think we've got, a little slow-mo here as well. So really focus in on, what the skis are doing when they're turning in the actual turn. And then another thing to look at is the turn more open or closed? And when I say that, is it more open? Is it kind of more down the hill? Are they accelerating? Or have they closed it off? A lot of times you would refer to that as finishing the turn. Is it controlling their speed? Is it bringing them across the hill more? We've got some folks that, not as many folks think it's a round turn, which I would agree with. We've got a few folks that think it's more of what I've put up here as an apostrophe style turn, where it's sharper at the bottom than it is at the top. And a few think it's more of a Z turn, where it's, more sharp right in the middle. But the majority kind of come in with that comma shape, where everything happens more at the top than the bottom, which I would definitely agree with. If you watch that skier, those skis turn pretty quick at the top and then just kind of glide through the rest of the turn. Coming down to that open or closed, I'd say it's definitely more open than closed. There's a couple times that they do come across the hill a little bit more, but for the most part, those skis are pointing downhill. It's somewhere around a medium turn. But the nice thing about this tool just makes it really simple, and gives you kind of graphics to look at and match up with what you're seeing. All right, let's move on to the next one. We've got a few more items in here. We've got ski relationship and edge relationship. We've got that wedge, parallel, diverging. And then next to it, we've got consistent, inconsistent, and just a little turn shape over here. Now, we might see some of these things happen in all different phases of the turn. You very well could see wedge at the top, parallel in the middle, diverging at the bottom. That's pretty typical out on the hill. But for tonight, what we're looking for is what is the maybe key deficiency that you see, wedge or diverging, and where is it happening in the turn? If they're doing a great job, which they very might be in some of these videos, you could certainly have them parallel and consistent all through it. So, and on that too, we've got, opposing edges, corresponding edges, or those corresponding but not equal. So you might see that one in like an A-frame from folks. Yeah, where that inside ski is on less of an angle than that outside ski coming around the turn. And opposing, you're going to see far more in a wedge. All right, and let's queue up the next video. So again, try to look past some of the obvious body performances and look right at the skis. Can you see a point where maybe they are not parallel in the turn? And where is that? And to get some practice, we're going to also include, the turn size, turn shape, and all of that in here to get some mileage. Cool, but I have no idea where the skier is, but I want to be there. That looks nice. And yeah, the turn shape is a little bit harder to see on this one. We're a little bit closer in a consensus between the different ones than we are in the other one. But yeah, definitely an open turn, as people are pointing out. And a little bit of a shorter turn, not quite a short turn. Not maybe quite as big as a medium. People have picked that maybe that schmedium realm. Technical term right there.
There's also, I was gonna say, I feel like there's also regional opinions on what constitutes a short versus medium versus long turn.
Absolutely. But yeah, I would definitely agree it's somewhere in that 2 to 3 realm. Some people are saying that he's mostly parallel throughout. He's got others are saying he's divergent, and a lot of that is coming in at the top of the turn. And then, yeah, that corresponding but not equal. A little bit of A-framing, definitely at the top.
I thought the intent to make the turn short was there, but the execution to make the turn short allowed for more travel down the hill than the skier intended. So as I was watching it, I'd agree looking at it again that it was probably a 2 or a 3. Instead of, I scored it a 1 because I thought that it was in the short realm.
Definitely trying to make a little bit of a shorter turn, and I've definitely done that in nice deep powder. You're not trying to crank them; it's a little bit shorter, but you keep it down the hill, so you do travel further. Because you want to keep momentum in that deep snow for sure. Now, what I was seeing a little bit was a little bit of wedge at the top of the turn, but definitely as they came through, some divergence towards the bottom. In that deep snow and any sort of chop, the skis are always going to get kind of rocked a little bit. It's really difficult to keep that perfect parallel relationship between the skis. And that's okay. Right now, where it's more about describing what we see, we're working on that observation piece, less on the evaluation piece quite yet. We want to build a full view of the skier before we start making, these, okay, they should play with this, they should go with this. Because unless you see the big picture, it can be difficult to pick out the most effective item that needs to be adjusted or changed to have the best result on their skiing. Quite often, we see one thing and we're like, that's it. Like that guy, probably 90% of you were like, he's aft. Actually, probably like 99% of you were like, he's aft. He's in the back seat. And that's probably where most of us would go with that, without maybe getting a bigger picture of why. Let's see, and let's jump to our third video, that last segment. That goes into performance. Where the snow is spraying off the skis. Is it coming from the tip, underfoot in the center of the ski, or is it spraying from the tail? And is it more of a pure carved, or is it a little more skidded? I would say something along the lines of like a pivot slippy would be full skidded. And then we've all seen racers rip down on ice. That would be more of a pure carve. And most of the time, we're doing something in between. For those of you from Okemo, you will know this skier. For those of you not from Okemo, you've probably heard this name. We all get to watch Pete Novum rip down. And the nice thing about this worksheet is you don't just have to use it on, beginners and intermediates. You can take this and apply it all the way up through and build a nice picture of what that skier is doing. So with that, let's watch Pete ski. And then one important thing to think about in all of this, is what's the skier's intent? What are they trying to do? Because you can have somebody come in, lose complete contact with the snow, just like that. And that's okay. That was something that they meant to do. Whereas we watch another skier, especially say in the bumps, get absolutely rocked and shoot out, catch air. It's probably not their intention. Brandon's shaking his head. May or may not have seen him do this multiple times. I have done this multiple times. But having an understanding of what they're trying to do, what the tasks they're trying to do is here, is important. Now, in this case, we don't know the tasks. We're just kind of making that up. I would say Pete's trying to go for some medium-ish radius turns and trying to make it fun. Just trying to rip.
This was, for context, just some ripping around videos for a part of Pete's national team application.
And considering that he made it, I guess that skiing was good enough. We've already covered these top sections with that turn shape, turn size, ski relationship, edge relationship. And the new one we're talking about this time is that turn performance and spray. So is it more carved than it is skidded? Is there an inconsistency in that, and where? And then where do we see most of the spray in the turn? Do we see a lot of spray at the top? Do we see more spray in the middle? Or do we see a lot in the bottom? And where in the ski is it coming from? Is it starting at the tip and working its way back? Starting in the center, the tail? These things can tell us a lot about what the body is doing, even though we're not getting into that tonight. These help build a bigger picture later on, so that way you can then look up and be like, oh yeah, I see that now. Okay. And yeah, that's the thing with MA. We don't always have to look at what this skier is doing wrong. We can pick out the good things that they're doing. They're making nice round turns. Pete's making great round turns. Yeah, he's closing them off, controlling his speed. When you get into an exam, at a level 1, if you go through and you give a running commentary of, oh, that looks like a medium radius turn. Yeah, nice and round, or, oh, a little bit sharper at the top than it is the bottom. So a little more open, or they're closing off the turn, finishing the turn, however you want to say it in, your own words. Because that's the other thing. We don't have to use this vernacular for everything. If you can get a point across in your own words, totally fine. But yeah, no, you can use this on all levels, all ranges. And the cool thing is you can put two skiers side by side, pull this up, and you can start to pick out the differences between them, which is really fun. But yeah, no, mostly closed in a lot of those turns, although some were a little more open. Using his turn shape and size to control his speed. Yeah, definitely in that medium realm. Pete's a darn good skier. Was able to maintain, pretty parallel skis throughout the whole thing. On pretty even corresponding edges. And that was consistent through the whole turn. And he leaned a little bit more towards that carved turn than maybe that very skiddy turn. Now that can be reinforced with the spray. We didn't see a heck of a lot of spray, although there was some. And looking at that day at the snow on there, it's a little bit softer, so you're gonna get a little bit of spray coming off. But it was coming off the whole ski. Most of us were saying spraying off the middle, and that's where I would say probably the majority you could see was. But if you looked real close, you could see it start up by the tip and kind of work its way back. But yeah, I mean, that's some darn good skiing. And, this tool allows us to go through and, if you can color, circle, draw, you can do MA even on the national team guys, which is really neat.
So what I was seeing is that he's consistent with how he's turning, but the distance between his feet at the top of the turn was much narrower than at the bottom of the turn.
Yes.
And that's something that I see when I look at racers a lot,
Yep.
and often, which he's not doing, but with racers, that they're putting weight on their inside ski at the bottom of the turn is actually slowing him down. But with him, it doesn't. He's got different goals than trying to get through a slalom or a GS course. But what is your thought about that? Like, he's opening up his stance at the bottom of the turn.
So, I mean, that's one of the things that isn't on these sheets. And that's, there's so many things you can look for. I tried to kind of condense it down to, all right, these are, in my mind, the most important things. But stance width absolutely varies with a lot of people. One of the things to look for is your feet can stay, say, the same distance apart as far as, when compared to your hips. But if as you tip and that inside leg shortens, the perceived distance can get a lot longer, which I don't think is necessarily what you were seeing, saying that, was happening more at the bottom. But that is one thing to consider. The more we lay the skis over, sometimes it can look like the stance width is getting wider, when in reality, our feet are still, if we took the skier and put them upright, the feet would still be about the same distance apart, but it looks like they're a lot wider than they actually are.
It seems like his skis were going at the same angle, where sometimes you see like that, like you have one leg that's a little bit flatter than the other. So, but it was just, he definitely, it looks like he's widening his stance at the bottom.
No, for sure. And, this is a great example of everybody has something that they're working on. We can pick and find something in everyone that we watch, which is neat, and that's okay. The goal is, to get, a perfect turn, but it's also to have fun. People's definitely having a good time during this. And if our intent is just to have a blast, we might maybe not be as focused on other bits. And we see it a lot in our own skiing. We get super laser focused on this one bit, and then other things we forget about. There's a lot to manage and a lot going on. So, but yeah, somebody threw up his carve score. That'd be fun to see for that one.
No, I think it's a really good observation. Some other folks had that observation in the chat as well. And my response to that, kind of add to what Evan said, is that this might be a little bit beyond the context of tonight and going into this evaluation phase. But when you see something like that, right, continue to ask why is that happening, right? Because now we're starting to connect it to body movements. And does that actually have a negative effect on the ski performance? To Evan's other point, there's a little bit of intent there too, right? Where I can paint this from a little bit of both perspectives, where the intent was to do some high performance, let's look cool for a national team application video, right? Kind of stuff. And when we typically, I think when people try to go for that like magazine shot of dragging their hip on the ground, they tend to bias more towards maybe holding on to those edges for a little longer, right, into the bottom of the turn so they can get lower and lower and lower and look even cooler, right? And I think there's probably some of that. But also, I think to some other folks' point, is that also knowing Pete's skiing very well, and he is actually, I'm incredibly impressed with how much Pete's skiing has actually continued to improve past this video. He sometimes had a habit of ending up on his inside ski, and that could also result in that what you all observe there, of maybe that distance between the skis, even though it is a lot coming from kind of that vertical separation more so than the stance width, that holding on might show up as, oh, hey, I've got this really wide stance width at the end of my turn, and now I've got to do this quick move to start into my new turn because I kind of hung out on the side there for a little too long, right, to make those cool edge angles. So like the observation is like just by far, I think, the most important practicing point, and especially being able to describe what the skis are doing going into any kind of movement analysis. But that's where you can take it beyond this, right? And that was a good conversation or topic of conversation that you guys brought up.
And, I just brought us back to that original sheet. It doesn't have everything on it. This is just a worksheet to get you guys moving in the right direction and to give you a starting point. One thing I see out of my staff, out of candidates, is they don't know where to start. And this gives you some finite things to just be like, all right, I see this, I see that. Boom, I've got this checklist in my head. Now, the next step after we go through and, make our observations, I see this, I see that. Then we start, bringing in that evaluation piece. Is this the ideal? Or is it away from that? Or is this just the reality of that skier? Whether it's a 4-year-old skiing or a 94-year-old skiing, you're going to see different things out of different people, because we're all just a little bit different in how our bodies, work and move, whether it's developmentally, injury-wise, or just, maybe your lack of flexibility, like I can't touch my toes, things like that. Hopefully everyone got something from this. And, even if you're like, yeah, I know all this, I got this nailed. If you take this and bring this sheet to, say, maybe the new staff at your mountain, plop this in front of them, you'll see MA develop a lot quicker. I saw a huge spike in MA skills within my staff when I was guinea pigging them with this. We couple times, when it was slow, we'd jump inside, watch some videos, pull this up, and it was really neat. I think it really helped with their success when they went to exams. But as you go up, that evaluation piece is really what's going to separate, 1 from a 2 from a 3. And being able to pick out the most important pieces in this. You might see a skier come through and they're consistently parallel, consistently on corresponding edges. You don't need to throw that out there. If that turn is nice and round, yeah, you might not need to throw that out there. It's picking out the things that are actually relevant to what's going on. But this at least gives everyone just kind of a starting point.
Yeah, and just to add to that a little bit, this is obviously a framework to just go out and be able to practice on your own or help guide other people for practice in MA. And like Evan said, it's not all encompassing. There's certainly other things, but there's also perspectives in here that I forget about all the time. I am terrible at identifying inconsistencies, and I should probably practice that more, right? Especially for between left and right turns. I am terrible at that. But This is just like kind of an overview of a tool to allow you to continue to develop your own MA skills or help others. And one of the reasons we kind of focused a bit on the ski performance tonight is because that focusing on body performance, I think, is something that all of us are pretty capable of a lot of times, describing what we see in the body. But as I'm sure Evan can also confirm, that like between listening to our own staffs between our ski schools or doing PSIA events and listening to what's going on there, there's oftentimes difficulty with relating this back to what the ski itself is doing, right? Like I was skiing with a level 3 candidate one time, and he made an observation about like, hey, he's doing this in transition, popping up.
Yeah.
And I asked a simple question of, well, what impact is that having on the skis? And he had a really hard time just answering that question. And if you're going for an assessment or anything like that, right, that's a really, really important point to be able to cover. And this worksheet is really good at helping you be able to relate ski performance to the body movements that might be causing that.
And Scott made a nice little point, about, this listing ski performance first before we jump down to the body performance. And that was intentional. That's where ideally we're going to look first. And I know that if I've got somebody coming in and let's say they are making that, a little bit sharper at the top, they're more of that comma turn, and maybe that medium radius, they're wedging at the top, diverging at the bottom, and I see all that spray at the top of the turn and from the tail, I probably have a pretty good idea of some body performances they're making. And then I can come down and confirm that, or I can look up, confirm it, and then come down in the worksheet, and start to draw that out.
I just had a quick question about the bottom part of the sheet, which is drawing the joint angles, the body angles, and the amount of leg steering.
Yeah.
But could you just touch on that briefly?
When I look at somebody down here, I'll just draw it out real quick. We've got that comma turning, diverging, wedging person, who's got the spray off the back. So what I might do is I might see that, there maybe have a little bit of a more vertical shin angle, a little more back, a little more up. So they might be back here. And I might see that right up here at the top of the turn. Chances are that if I see that, I'm also going to see them banking into the turn pretty good. And as far as steering, I might not see much. I might only see a little bit, if any. They're using the side cut to leverage that ski around. And it might not be the legs that are doing the steering. They might be kind of, throwing that upper body to get things moving. But from here, you can start to build out this in your head, look up and be like, oh yeah, I see that now.